That sounds great. We got some water. Yeah.
Well, everyone, welcome back to a very exciting episode of the Storybox podcast. Today, my friends, I'm delighted to welcome Anthony Evans. Now, for those of you that don't know who this incredible man is or his voice, I'm go and look him up on YouTube, please. But Anthony Evans, for over 2 decades, has voiced the gospel music with a melodic and thought-provoking style. He has emerged as one of Christian music premier worship leaders and singer and songwriters. Along the way, Anthony has released 10 solo projects, believe it or not, the last 2 climbing all the way to #1 on Billboard's top gospel album charts. Incredible achievement, man, because that's no easy thing to do. He's released his first book, Unexpected Places. He's been in numerous music videos, acted in 2 movies, and performed as Beast in a Disney Hollywood Bowl production of Beauty and the Beast. In addition, he has collaborated with his inspirational father as well, and well-renowned speaker, Dr. Tony Evans. I'm pretty sure a lot of you, if you are a Christian in that realm, you would know who he is, as well as his sisters, Priscilla and Crystal Evans, along with his brother, author and speaker, who I just spoke earlier today with, Jonathan Evans, who is amazing. They have a new book coming out, or you have a new book coming out, which is honestly incredible, called Divine Disruption. And, I could go on and on and on about your incredible achievements, Anthony, but welcome so much to the Storybox podcast today, my friend.
Thank you, Jay. I'm really glad to be here. I appreciate it. That was a very nice intro. I actually kind of felt weird toward the end. I was like, okay. No, thanks, man. Glad to be here.
You're like, is he going to keep going or is he going to stop?
They gave him a lot of stuff. No, man. It's so good to be here. So special, actually, to be here with you discussing this project, because it is so unique and it involves all of my family members. A book authored by 5 different nuclear family members. I don't even know if that's ever happened, but the conversation that we have, our hope is to really encourage the audience's heart toward hope and toward faith. So I love that. Thank you for having that. Thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, man. And you're right. This book, Divine Disruption, is very unique. I have never read, and I don't know if you can see already, I'm a huge reader. So I don't think I've ever read a book or even come across a book that has 5 authors within the same family and the message is interlined, it's interlinked. And it all comes together amazingly. Like, that's the only really way to describe it. I've only read the first couple of pages of the book, and I'm holding out until I get a physical copy. I'm that sort of person. But I just have to say, well done for creating this book. I mean, it's a much needed message. I mean, hope kind of seems like it is going ever thin in this ever darkening world. So I need this book, as I'm sure a lot of people need it too. Anthony, before we dive into your backstory as well, which I'm very excited to get into, my very first question to you is a question that I ask all my guests at the start anyway, which is, what does success look like for you?
Success for me now, I don't want to say this and make it think like, oh, he's so wise. It's because of a bunch of mistakes. Success to me right now looks like, am I doing what I know I'm called to do, what my heart would be doing, whether there was a check involved or not? Am I doing what I'm called to do, and am I at peace? Because there was a time where I was doing what everybody expected for me to do, and I wasn't at peace, and I was still getting paid for it. But at the end of the day, after you get that check, you cannot go write a check for peace. So I was not successful, but I had a lot. And the more I had, the house I had at that moment, the echo of my voice was painful, because in the house, it was painful to hear that. So it's like, the more you have sometimes when it's not based on peace, can actually make the success, quote unquote, more painful.
When was the moment for you that you realized this was in fact success for you? Was it actually you being in that home and finding the echo of your voice, not really liking it so much? Or was there sort of this gradual thing over time for you?
Yeah, it was actually a moment. It was gradual, but then it hit a moment. It was where I'm talking about. I was living in Nashville, Tennessee at that point, and there's nothing wrong with that place. But for me, it was all me striving to be something. So it was that moment of having events on the calendar, having an album out that I really didn't like, that I kind of made because I thought I needed to sound like this for it to be successful. Having relationships and people in my life who had no business being there. I was stacked with a lot of stuff, but it's almost like being stacked with debt. It can look cool to everybody around you, but you get a bill that you know you can't pay.
Yeah.
That it was at that moment where I realized I cannot pay for this emotionally and spiritually anymore. So I had to make a change or I was going to crash and burn.
What was that change like? Was it a difficult process for you?
The change was a difficult process because I had to redefine my mindset. I stopped chasing the applause.
Yeah.
And I started chasing peace. And sometimes the two don't coincide. Sometimes they don't. So I had to make a decision I'm going to chase the peace. And what happened in that moment, one of the things that happened, like I wasn't with my record label anymore because they're great people, but the album that I didn't want to make didn't work, which was made it even worse. But so I was done with that. And one of the things that happened is I went into a house that was a studio with some of my great friends who were world-class musicians. I just made an album with nobody telling me what they thought. I just was singing my heart. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I was draining my bank accounts to make this album because nobody was paying for it. And that album, I started to tour it. And the response from the audience, even though a lot of the songs were covers, was like, yo, what went on with you? Why does this sound so like you? It sounds fresh. And I thought, I'm never doing anything but this again. Because it happened to work, commercial wise and work wise too. But I was willing to take that risk. And when you take that risk at being authentically you, there's nothing like it. Even if nobody's applauding, to be at peace, man, that is God's applause to me. And that's all that matters.
I love that, man. So for someone that is struggling with finding peace in their own life currently, they're wrestling with it, they don't even know what it feels like or is, how would you navigate someone through that scenario?
Man, there's so many different versions of that they can be looking for. Career peace, relational peace, spiritual peace, emotional. I mean, there's so many things, but the bottom line is for me, and I want your listeners, because I know we are speaking to people who are faith-based, people who are Christians and not, and all that stuff. I'm not trying to ever, as we talk, push my faith on anybody. I'm telling you my story because you're asking. That's what I want listeners to know, that I'm coming from that, because I don't ever want people to be like, oh, he's pushing agendas on me. No, it's like, I'm telling you my story. So my encouragement, one time I was on a plane and we were circling. I fly all the time. I think I've flown like 3 million miles at this point. We were circling the runway, and the pilot came on and said, guys, the runway is not clear. So we're going to keep circling until they clear the runway. But if they don't clear the runway, we're going to have to divert and land somewhere else. Ultimately, they didn't clear the runway. They didn't clear it, and we had to divert. And as we were diverting, I thought, how many times have I asked to go to a specific place? I've asked God to take me to a specific place, but the runway in my life is full of other stuff, and he can't land what I'm asking for in my life.
Yeah.
And he has to divert it to somewhere else. So I would ask, one of the first questions I would ask myself is, I would be asking God for peace or whatever it is to help me through whatever circumstance it is. And then I would make sure I was being responsible enough to make sure the runway of my life is clear for him to land what I'm asking for in it. Back when I was all messed up internally with that scenario I was talking about, I was busy trying to make everybody happy. I was busy trying to make this album and get this applause and do this many shows. There was not room for God to land peace in my life until I stopped chasing the applause of others. So one of the things I would say was make room.
I appreciate you being comfortable enough, man, to actually share your story. And I say, go for it. Like, I know you're not trying to force it down anyone's throat. And I never try and do that anyway. Yeah. I think we come together, we share our story. And if people want to use it or appreciate it, then so be it. That's the way I look at it, at least. Yeah. But one thing that I am interested in is or for you more specifically, how did you learn to trust God's leading in your life in that moment?
Yeah. It's hard, but it is just one step at a time. It is doing the next thing. That's how I learned how to trust, is doing the next thing. It's hard for me because I'm the emotional one of the family. I know if your listeners could see me, they would see a linebacker looking dude on here, but sometimes I have the emotions of a ballerina. Whatever, I'm okay with it. Like I'm an emotional dude, so I can't just make a decision to do it. Like my brother can do that. Like he's the logical one. I get all these feelings. So I have to go, I'm going to take this next step. I'm going to learn what it feels like to trust in this next step. Then I'm going to take another one. And before you know it, you're running in the direction that you were scared to go in the first place, because you realize like, oh, this is solid. That's how I've been able to take those steps.
So before you got to this point in your life, you're still an amazing gospel singer. Why did you decide to become a gospel singer in the first place? When was the moment you discovered your voice? Like, you had this incredible ability to sing and literally pierce the hearts of so many people.
Yeah. I didn't know that until I was about 18 years old, and people around me knew it. I didn't know it then. I just started to hear it, like, hey, you could do this if you really wanted to. Or my dad and mom heard me sing later in life, like just around the house. And they were like, did we miss something with this one? Like, did we? And so they started, and they immediately stressed out and started to try to help figure out ways to encourage me into singing. And then in college is kind of where the passion for it started. And I just started to believe people around me who were saying, you can figure this out. You could do this if you wanted to. And the passion, the feelings followed my feet as it relates to my passion for singing. And I believe feelings will follow your feet in whatever it is. If you're not necessarily like, I don't feel like this, you may not feel like going to the gym. Once you start seeing results, it's a little easier to go up and get to the gym. That's how I did it, one step at a time, in spite of the way that I may have felt at times about singing.
Did you want to be something else besides a singer?
Absolutely. I wanted to be a large animal veterinarian. That's what I wanted to be my whole life. What people don't know about me, and I was probably going to bring him up later, is that I am a horse lover. Like I look like a city slicker. I'm in and out of LA and doing all these shows, and that, man, when I am off, I will go to a barn and be dirty and mess with my horses all day. And so anyway, that's what I wanted it to be. And so getting on a stage is way different than getting on a horse.
So it kind of, life kind of took you in a very different direction, but one that you have finally found peace in, and you do an amazing job at it, man. Like I was in 2017 when your song came out called See You Again. My goodness, dude. Like, we're going back a number of years, right? But still, like that was one of the songs for me, because I'm big into gospel music and all that. That was one of the songs for me that sort of like helped me just through a dark period. So I appreciate you singing that song, man. It's for those people that want to listen to it, go and listen to it. But more specifically for you, I want to ask, like, getting into the heart of your story at the moment, when would you say was the most vulnerable time for you in your life?
Oh, man. I think there have been a few, but the most vulnerable time for me in my life was losing our mother. I would say there's been a couple instances outside of that, but the main one was losing our mother. That was a very hard time, because any kind of loss is hard and ridiculous, but that loss for me was on some other level, because you speak about faith, you're on stage all the time, and then you're praying like for healing and for God to fix, and he's not. And it's like, how are you going to handle that? And in public, because everybody's watching, or it felt like everybody was watching.
How did you cope with it, man?
I would ask for, I would not think I was going to make it. And then there'd always be some instance where God would put something in right when I felt like everything was tanking, he would put something would happen that would pull me back up. And that's how I made it. Like, God graciously kind of throwing me nuggets as I hurt. That's how I made it.
What were those nuggets specifically? Are you comfortable with sharing some of them?
Oh yeah, I'm thinking of instances where, well, first of all, I mentioned to you that I'm the wildly emotional guy, but I have had, I always end up telling stories, man. There's a movie that I remember very clearly because I'm a little bit older, but there's a original version of a movie called The Karate Kid that I like Daniel's son, Mr. Miyagi, like not Cobra Kai, not all this new stuff. I was like, nothing wrong with it, but there was a time in that movie where Daniel's son wanted to learn how to fight. He was not interested in anything else. And Mr. Miyagi said, here's a paintbrush and here's some pads or whatever. I want you to go paint these fences, paint like this. And he showed him the upstroke and downstroke. Then he said, go wax on and wax off these cars. And Daniel was doing it and thought he'd have to do one or like a few. And he was doing a bunch of cars and painting a bunch of fences. And he was irritated and annoyed. And he went to Mr. Miyagi and was like, I came to fight. Like, oh, that whole, I don't want to be painting. I don't want to be your maid, basically. And Mr. Miyagi simultaneously threw a punch, and that motion of painting the fence blocked that punch. Then he threw another one, and that waxing off that round motion blocked another punch. He had no idea that what he was considering to be mundane was teaching him how to fight. And I did not know when I was losing my mom that the things that I was doing in my life that were mundane when it comes to working on my emotional health, being in therapy, obviously meditating on God's word, there'd be times where I'd feel myself emotionally start to tank, and there'd be something that came to my memory like that. And it was because I didn't resent the mundane moments in my life. And that was one of the moments where God whispered into my ear. Like, it was almost like a wink, like, I got you, like, I got you. And I would feel those winks constantly. That's one of the ways. But believe me, I blocked so many punches, emotional punches and spiritual punches, with the fact that I was before that kind of set up for it.
And it's so easy for us to do that, isn't it? Like, it's so easy for us the moment we're in pain and discomfort to just be angry, to be annoyed, to be frustrated, to have all these emotions building up inside of us that sort of direct us away from the good, which is God. Yeah. Yeah. So I completely understand that, man.
I'm so down with emotions boiling up inside of us. Obviously, that happens. We're human. I am not down anymore with with trying to figure out a way, to not feel them and to push them aside. Because I've learned that if you feel it, you can heal it. That's the bottom line. So I've had to put myself in positions to allow myself to feel angry, allow myself to feel hopeless, allow myself to feel the loss. Don't stay there, but I allow myself to feel it. And then I go, how am I going to get out of this? And the truth of God's word in my life has been the way that I've gotten out of it.
I'm curious, man, what have you learned about going through all this? What have you learned about the process of, or what really forgiveness is? What
forgiveness is, man, forgiveness is, in a lot of cases, has been setting myself free. And a lot of people know that. But, and once you realize, for me being a Christian man, once you realize all that you have been forgiven of, and all that has been, all the grace that has been shown to you, it becomes a way easier to show it to other people, Now you don't have to forgive and stay in a scenario. I mean, you don't have to forgive and stay there. You can forgive and figure out a new proximity. But I've just learned that is forgiveness is the key a lot of times to setting yourself free and getting to where you need to be. And in addition, doing the same for whoever it is that needs that forgiveness.
Yeah, it's important truth, man. Like I'm currently in the process of writing another book, and it's towards basically arriving at the place of forgiveness. And you're right, it's a number of areas, and the biggest one is obviously setting yourself free, so then you can achieve that level of peace. And it doesn't mean that you have to go back to the person either. It kind of means you put up boundaries to protect yourself from being hurt once again. And that, there's a number of other elements to it that I won't get into, but I sort of want to dive into the area of faith for one's life. And before we dive into it even further, I want to ask you, sort of giving people context, when was the moment that God was made real for you, that he came into your heart and into your life?
Well, that was in the second grade. Because I remember vividly in the second grade making a decision, even though I was 8 or whatever. Wait, are you 8 in the second grade? Roughly 7, 8 if you're a little slower like me, Back then I didn't have that creative mind. It's not slow. I was creative, and so it was hard for me to pay attention. But anyway, back around then, but I also remember a time when I was 18 when I realized that God doesn't have grandkids. Like, you're not going to be grafted in to having a relationship with them because your family is who your family is. And that was a different experience. That was another level of me having to figure out my own situation and how do I want this to look. There's been different levels, but those are two of the majors where I was like, oh, this is my journey. This is not my little safe environment. Leaving home for me at 18 was like leaving a greenhouse and trying to grow outside of a greenhouse where the real elements are hitting you. And that can be different.
Yeah, 100%, man. Like what has your father taught you about what real faith is? And then secondly, what is your mother, or what did your mother teach you about real faith?
Well, I can couple them together, but because I'm about to say the same thing about both. My parents are like, now that I'm older, I'm like, man, this is crazy. Like, I feel like I won the lottery as it relates to parents, because they did not waver. My dad, growing up, when he was speaking and all that around, I had no idea that he was really fighting in a day and age where like a Black preacher was not being allowed to do a lot of things outside of the box at all. And he never allowed that to shake his calling, to make him question himself, to make him question God when he was being treated awful by people. My mother too. They just moved forward. My dad did not chase popularity. There was a moment where like the prosperity theology was huge. Like there was a whole moment that was real popular. My dad just was like, no, I'm called to do this. And I'm just going to stay the course over here. And the faithfulness of them, of my parents, coupled with really, they don't need a lot. My parents still live in the house that we grew up in. I was 3 years old. We moved into the current house that my dad is in right now. And the faithfulness coupled with that, not buying into culture, those have been the things from both of them that I cling to. I really cling hard to that.
It would have been a powerful, like growing up with that is extremely powerful. And yeah. Why do you think that God oftentimes tests our faith to begin with?
You know, I think it's the same reason why you add weight to a barbell when you're bench pressing. The weight not only shows you that you're stronger, sometimes you kind of crumble under the weight, but eventually, if you keep pushing that up, your max will grow, meaning you will grow. Like, you will grow. I think that's the reason. So when I look at it that way, when I look at trials, when things get harder, when I look at it through the lens of God's truth, if he's working all things together for good, then I can push this up and not think, what evil God would put more weight on me when I can't? Like, that's what naturally will happen if you're not thinking about the result of what he's training you to look like and be like.
Yeah, that's important.
Absolutely.
So can you share, you got this amazing book coming out November 4th, I believe it is.
November 9th.
November 9th. Sorry, my bad. I'm hoping that it comes out earlier. Divine Disruption. And I believe you are the one that sort of brought all your family together and said, we've got to make this book. So are you able to share the story behind that?
Yeah, I can. I'll try to be brief, but back to when I was talking about my album, my getting dropped from the record label and all that stuff, I decided to keep going. Remember I said I made that other album, things went great. So the bottom line is back then I started to have to learn how to do all this stuff myself because I wasn't surrounded by management teams and I wasn't, but I was like, I'm not going to stop. So fast forward 15 years later, I didn't know that me learning how to do all that was me setting up my own production company arm. Like it turned into its own production company where everything for me and my family, a lot of our family things are housed out of our production company, which is, you know, that right there, Sherman James, which are my grandfather's names because they started this whole thing. So Sherman James Productions started. My mom saw us doing things together under that umbrella. And she said to me many times, but before she passed specifically, she said, all of you together. I want all of you together. Like, and that was just what she wanted. So my motivation changed. I'm driven anyway, but my motivation, when your mother says that, then it's kind of one of her last kind of imperative, like you do this kind of statements to you, you do it. So I presented the idea to my family. I told them, you know, we all carry the same DNA, but then we branch out into different personalities. I'm the emotional one. Crystal's the hyper intelligent. Jonathan's the logical one. Priscilla's Miss Personality. My dad is just this feel. I mean, we all kind of, and I was like, what if somebody could come and sit at the table with our family and hear this story in chronological order, but hear our vantage points, perspectives, how we handled things, how many more people could we potentially impact with this story? And turn somehow this mess in our lives into something good. And then beyond that, our mom said to do it. So everybody sit down, we're doing it. That's the bottom line. And then the production company side of me that I happened upon because of what I viewed as a failure earlier in my career has been able to house and handle it. So that's how it happened. My mom said, do it. And circumstances that I thought weren't working in my favor were.
What do you hope the most for people to get out of this book?
Oh man, the subtitle is Holding On to Faith When Life Breaks Your Heart. I want, for me and my family, if a life and our world and everything has been like a raging sea, like being in the middle of a raging sea with no floaties. Like it feels like, so you might stay up if you can swim really hard, but everybody's exhausted. It doesn't matter. Michael Phelps would be exhausted and out there. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. Our faith has been like a life jacket in those raging seas. The raging seas haven't stopped, but our heart doesn't feel as heavy in the raging seas. I want people to understand that there is an infinite amount of life jackets and all they have to do is put it on. And there is a way to hold on to faith when life breaks your heart. And for us, that life jacket has been our faith, has been understanding that there is something bigger at play. There is something going on larger than us. I want them to feel authenticity and vulnerability and transparency. But when they read that last word, I want them to shut that book and take a deep breath in and say, I'm going to be okay. That's what we want.
I love that, man. And I have no doubt that it is going to touch the hearts and lives of many, many people around the world. I mean, it kind of bridges the gap between Christian and non-Christian. That's one of the things I love about it, among all the other things that I mentioned earlier in this conversation. But last couple of questions, if that's okay with you, Anthony. But do you feel like anything is currently missing in your life?
There's always, I'm really trying to answer that question honestly and not give like a canned answer you do on a podcast. You know what I mean? Like I can honestly say that right now, the only thing missing in my life, I honestly, Jay, I'm trying to think of something. I can't think of anything missing from my life. I'm the last single one in my family. So I was like, is it like kids and a spouse? Is it like, but I actually am so grateful for what I have and the abilities I have and this things like this book in my family. I'm like, no, man, it almost feels like disrespectful to say something's missing when you're healthy and you're working and all, I'm going to chill with trying to look for something to complain about because that feels, I'm just going to be grateful. So right now, thankfully, Jay, in spite of all the circumstances we faced, no, but that goes back to the beginning. It's because I've made peace, the barometer and the odometer as it relates to the barometer, the measuring stick for do I have everything I need? And I have that.
That's good, man. Like you don't need to have something missing in your life. You can be at peace with everything that you have. Like it's when we get ahead of ourselves, when we want, that we feel even worse. We can get ourselves into a lot of trouble. But 100%. Anthony, man, where can people find you? Before I ask the last two questions, where can they find you, listen to your music, and get a copy of this new book?
Well, they can go everything one-stop shop. They can go to divinedisruptionbook.com. That's divinedisruptionbook.com. And there's a breakdown of all 5 of us. And then underneath us, you can click to go individually if you want to, but then the book is there. The book is there too. And all the socials.
It's definitely not hard to find. And I highly encourage people to go and get a copy of his book as well. Anthony, man, my final 2 questions for you. This is a question that I love asking people towards the end, but what do you love the most about yourself and your story?
I love the most about myself. I think I've learned to love the emotional side of me. I think that allows me to connect. It allows me to do my job. It allows me to connect to people, allows me to write a book. The empathy, I love that. I really want to engage in people's stories. I used to not like the emotional side because culture says, be tough, So anyway, and then what was the second part?
What do you love the most about your story?
What do I love the most about my story is that I am a co-author. The weight is not all on me.
I love that, man. Love it. My final question for you, man, is my all-time favorite question. I ask everyone at the end of all my conversations. It's a hypothetical one. So I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you've been able to reach the age of 100. All your friends and your family have decided to put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. Don't ask me how in the world they got it all. We'll call it magic for the sake of argument. But they've been able to get it and show it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want that film to say and to show about your life?
I want that film to show that he was a fierce protector of those that he loved, that he knew how to have a good time and enjoyed life. And that through the way that this guy lived, people understood the importance of faith in your life. It wasn't what he said. It was what and how he lived that made faith important.
Perfect send-off message. Anthony Evans, man, thank you so much for your time, for showing up in the world, for your amazing voice that is no doubt going to inspire and help so many people around the world. Thank you for being a part of this book and for coming on the Storybox podcast today and sharing a little bit about your story. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. And congrats on all the things that the Storybox has been doing, man. And I love it. And congrats to you.